Hi, my name is Shane Sanders. I'm an associate professor of sport analytics and sports economics at Syracuse University. Today I will be discussing informed voting in the Major League Baseball MVP race. And this is joint work with Joel Potter, Justin Ehrlich, and Justin Perline. So Major League Baseball was formed as a loose confederacy of two leagues in 1903. It combined the National League, which was formed in 1876, and the American League, which had just been formed in 1901. And since 1911, the National League and American League have selected separate MVPs following each season. And since 1931, the Baseball Writers Association of America has been responsible for this selection. Formal voting for the MVP race began in 1938 with 3 baseball writers members voting from each city. This was reduced to 2 in 1961. Today there are 60 voters, 30 for each league race. Hence there are a total of 30 first place votes. Each voter fills in a 10-place ballot with his or her first place vote, second place vote, all the way out to 10th place vote, and this is a strictly write-in ballot. There are no suggestions as to who the candidates should be. Players receive 14 points for each first place vote, 9 points for each second place vote, 8 for each third place vote, and so on, down to 1 point for each 10th place vote. The player with the highest point total wins. In each league there are 59 times 30 or 1770 points available, but the most a single player can receive is 420 points if they sweep all the first place votes. Without the benefit of a cross-positional win value measure, MLB MVP voting represents an apples to oranges comparison. For example, how should one compare a top shortstop to a top pitcher without such a measure? The top pitcher plays with a very different frequency and adds value per outing in a very different way than a top shortstop does. In 2004, wins above replacement was created by baseball prospectus writer Jay Jaffe as a cross-positional measure of player win value above the replacement player at position. From 2004, WAR has been calculated for all MLB player seasons. Importantly, it has also been calculated retrospectively for the universe of preserved professional baseball. For example, Baseball Reference features retrospective calculations beginning with the first season of the first professional baseball league, the famous NAPBBP, which actually was the predecessor to the National League, continuing through the histories of the NL and AL. And so this whole project to retrospectively calculate WAR rests upon retrosheet.org, which provides the type of play-by-play data needed for this type of calculation. So we treat the concurrent collection of past and present WAR data since 2004 as something of a natural experimental setting. Since '04, MLB MVP award voters have voted largely in the knowledge of the WAR measure and of player WAR values. Before 2004, voters were relatively uninformed, and MVP decisions involved apples to oranges comparisons across position. But we can, of course, look behind the curtain given the retrospective calculations. Given WAR's prominence, one might speculate that baseball writers who vote for MVP awards each year represent informed voters relative to their pre-2004 counterparts. Beyond frequent references to WAR by baseball writers, we can refer to a Google Trends time series graph of the term's search history prominence since 2004 to see how the measure has grown. We see that interest in WAR is cyclical. It builds throughout the MLB season, typically peaking in August or September and falling off during the playoffs and into the off season. The MLB MVP vote occurs just after the close of the MLB regular season in September, at or near the height of annual search interest in WAR. we can discuss some of the literature that predates this paper. Banerjee et al. Conduct field voting experiments in India, and they find evidence that nonpartisan third-party public disclosure of incumbent legislator report cards led to a higher voter share for high-performing incumbents. So if there's an objective instrument to identify high-performing incumbents, then they receive more votes. Pandey reviews the literature and concludes the above finding to be robust across different voting environments. More generally, we can discuss the literature surrounding the use of Major League Baseball as a laboratory for public choice, economics of regulation, and labor economics. So Shugart talks about antitrust legislation related to baseball. Ross and Dunn examine the income tax responsiveness of MLB All-Stars, a super high income group. Goff, Shugart, and Tollison examine moral hazard in baseball. Hill and Groothuis discuss redistribution of rents among teams of a league through revenue sharing, and Fort helps to break the literature on inelastic ticket pricing in Major League Baseball. In this paper, we ask, do MLB MVP elections beginning in 2004 relate more strongly to an objective, comprehensive cross-positional measure of on-field value, i.e. WAR? That is, are informed voters making choices that allow them to more closely identify the true MVP in each league? In the absence of WAR, what types of proxies for player value were voters using prior to 2004? And kind of as a side question, we ask, do elite MLB pitchers share the fate of individuals with a Christmas birthday? Namely, after they receive the Cy Young Award, such a pitcher receives the Cy Young Award, are voters reluctant to double reward them, especially in the absence of WAR values before 2004? So do we observe this penalty on pitchers conditional on WAR? We collected data on the top 50 seasonal MLB WAR leaders in each season from 1980 to 2017. This dataset consists of 1,900 player season observations scraped from baseballreference.com with permission from CEO Sean Foreman, using RVest package in R. Variables include WAR value, MVP candidate vote count, whether the player is a pitcher, primary team of play fixed effects, whether traded during season, and league of play. Voter level or ballot level data was not publicly disclosed until 2018. Therefore, we examine MLB MVP vote count for a player season as our main left-hand side variable. We take advantage of a long set of longitudinal data with substantial variation in player characteristics. We also take advantage of the natural experimental context of WAR's development and subsequent retrospective calculation back to the barnstorming days of baseball. Within our data, we have 1,123 player seasons that received at least one vote in an MVP race. There were 30 voters casting up to 10 votes per league season, and there were 76 league seasons in the data. So the minimum number of player seasons represented is 760. The maximum is 22,800. We know that almost all votes were used, so almost all ballots were completely specified. Hence, we conclude a high degree of consensus among voters. So we're a lot closer to the minimum number of player seasons represented than to the maximum. We also have an idea that this consensus did not always correspond to WAR, and we can verify this through pitcher summary statistics. This plot represents the Spearman rank correlation between WAR and MVP vote points by league season. And so we observe that before 2004, this Spearman rank correlation was lower, and it wasn't really climbing. After 2004, the average Spearman rank correlation between WAR and MVP vote points within a league season is higher, and it's been growing. To test this, we specify a set of OLS and negative binomial count models. We also use Poisson count models. And each of these models has team fixed effects regressions to estimate the effect of the summarized explanatory variables upon vote count. Alternatively, we specify the same models with league fixed effects in place of team fixed effects. So we have our three main model results here for OLS, negative binomial, and Poisson regressions. And so model 1 is going to make the most intuitive sense. It's the OLS model with just simply vote points on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we're going to have WAR for the player season. WAR interacted with it being 2004 or after, whether the player is a pitcher, whether the player played in the American League, and we have our constant. And so what model 1 says is that WAR is important for each additional unit of WAR. On average, you're expected to get about 37.6 more vote points in the MVP race within our sample. But after 2004, this effect increases significantly and substantially so you get 3 additional points after 2004 for each additional revealed unit of WAR. So WAR was more salient after 2004, and we're picking up that salience effect in the voting through that second result. And so both of these results are robust against model specification and model selection. So we see in models 1, 2, and 3, regarding model selection, we get the same qualitative results. We also see that there is a pitcher penalty. Conditional on WAR, pitchers are getting about 79 fewer vote points. There's no real difference across the league. Maybe something weird going on with the Poisson model, but otherwise, the model selected does not really affect the qualitative nature of the results throughout. We run these same specifications for pitchers only, and what we find is that WAR does help pitchers acquire more vote points, but only about 13 additional vote points per unit of WAR. And so it's a weaker effect, and the strength of the effect did not change significantly after the advent of WAR. So WAR has done nothing to address the plight of the pitchers in the MVP race. In a Chow test, we reject the null hypothesis that the coefficient for WAR was equal before and after 2004. We would like to determine endogenously when the structural break or breaks occurred. However, we are not dealing with a strict time series dataset here, but rather a panel data with repeated time observations. So as far as I know, an exogenous test, such as the Chow test, is the appropriate test here, especially given that we know when the event under consideration occurred, namely the advent of WAR in early 2004. We find that WAR matters in the MVP race, and this is particularly so after 2004. The effect of WAR on MVP vote count increased after 2004. There is no evidence that this was a general time trend. If we create an interaction term capturing the effect of WAR on MVP vote count from 94 to 2003, or for alternative periods leading up to 2004, we find that revealed WAR had no more effect on MVP voting during this intermediate time period than during the early period of the data. So it doesn't seem like voters were just slowly becoming more savvy. It seems like there actually was a break in their information and their behavior from 2004. Conditional on WAR value, pitchers are penalized by MVP voters, both before and during the era of WAR. Also, there is preliminary evidence that being traded mid-season also is penalized by MVP voters, which on one hand you might consider strange because players have no control over whether they're traded, but on the other hand, there might be some adverse selection signal in being traded that WAR isn't picking up on, but that is being signaled by teams. Age, experience, and position of play are needed as controls in a fully specified model. So we still have some data work to do here, and so that's ongoing. Thank you. I appreciate you listening to my presentation and would appreciate any comments that you have.